as you can see, we're looking at a scenario in which Egypt goes to war with Sudan. So let's start it. Egypt decides they want to take Sudan back for once and for all. Yes, once and for all. So they start their invasion of Egypt of Sudan with the goal of capturing Cairo and the coast. So as you can see, they start an offensive over by the Nile and one down the coast. They start moving down the coast. Some nations aren't very happy about this. Ethiopia takes the opportunity to declare war on Egypt. Why? A, Egypt and Ethiopia haven't had good relations, and B, it prevents Egypt from being ever strong enough for a bit longer to threaten its dam. But as Sudan is still struggling in the war, and their coast falls, as they manage to establish a stalemate, Egypt needs a short area here to secure its border. But they manage to get Somalia to help them. Why does Somalia help Egypt in their war against Sudan? One massive reason. A big chunk of Ethiopia out to here is full of Somalis. So it's the reason. To get more Somalis. Quickly, that's what the front line looks like. But once Ethiopian troops arrive, it goes another way. With the African Union demanding an end to this conflict, but it doesn't happen. With Ethiopia making the first successful offensive of its alliance. Why is it the first one? Because, well, they managed to kick. First, they invade the area, the Somaliland area, and then they invade the full country. They cut off in multiple spots, leading to the surrender. But Egypt's offensive, although much slower, is starting to move forwards down the Nile. With South Sudan wanting to annex some parts of Sudan. So they decide to go to the war. Well, there are risks here. With this being how South Sudan's offensive goes. But Egypt gets locked into a stalemate a bit further ahead than where they were. But during this time, Ethiopia takes the opportunity, along with Sudan, to push South Sudan back. Realizing if Israel gets in, it'll cause Egypt big problems. They try to persuade Israel to join this war. No more nations decide to join, realizing that Egypt doesn't really care about its allies, as two of its allies have collapsed. A new nation decides to enter the playing field, which ends up being Israel. Why, you may say? Well, A, they can take over the Suez Canal in a peace treaty. B, if they can succeed, they'll do really good for this war. As they approach into the Sinai Peninsula, they manage to get here by the time Egyptian forces arrive. But this really upsets a few people. Two nations get really upset by this. Yes, what were you expecting? With help, they managed to take over this area. But they made one massive mistake. This? They didn't estimate properly. So now they basically get pushed back. My finger's freezing on my computer. Yeah, not great. Well, they take their advance even further as they move in and take over Lebanon, as they're fully involved in this war. With Egypt and Israel in a complete stalemate. Sudan tries to launch a counter-offensive, but it's failing. With Sudan's capital, Khartoum, falling, but they refuse to surrender. With Ethiopia managing to persuade Eritrea to join the war. What do they get in return? Nothing. Money is what they promise them. And so the front line ends up like this. But with Egypt deciding to move into an offensive into Eritrea, which Eritrea realized was probably a bad idea to do this. As well, they get pushed right back by Egypt's forces. Egypt is rapidly launching its offensive. And then into the desert they go, where there's not much fighting. They decide to make a big encirclement here, leading to the surrender of these troops. With Sudan half out of this war and half in, they need to find somebody who's willing to gain off this. With them offering Libya lands here, but Egypt doesn't realize that's happening. With Egypt managing to break through, pushing Israel back out of the Sinai Peninsula, but a stalemate's reestablished. With Ethiopia and Sudan going through mass conscription. And during this, well, the Sudanian capital is still down. With Eritrea falling and Ethiopia being pushed back significantly, finally the mobilization's done after a few months, and they manage to push Egypt's forces back, liberating its own territory. At the same time, Sudan moves up and manages to re-encircle Khartoum. Well, quickly after, they seize it. Well, quickly, the front line turns out to be like this. And you may say, that's crazy. But for Egypt, protests break out in Sudan, and they offer Libya again, and they also offer help. So Libya decides to do something. Though it's rebel groups, and these rebels decide to side away. Although they didn't realize. As Libya starts pushing them back. With Sudan pushing Egypt out of the country just about. Egypt's forces retreating from here. And well, this was the next front. With the front lines collapsing, Israel about to break through its stalemate, Sudan pushing up, along with Ethiopia, Libya trying to collapse the Libyan civil war, and Israel gets across there, but Sudan moves up the Nile a bit, which leads to the connection of the front, which leads to the surrender of these forces, which leads to Libya's forces being like this. And well, Egypt's capital gets encircled, Cairo. With Sudan's forces and a lot of the rebel groups being shocked by how successful it is, manages to cause the collapse of Libya's rebel forces, which leads to this falling, and then Every's forces move in, capturing Cairo. So let's see the peace treaty. Not only did Libya get put back in one piece, that's the only thing we know for certain. Let's see how the rest of the peace treaty goes. Expected to pay $200 billion in reparations in the next 10 years. 100 of them to Eritrea, 25 to Ethiopia, 50 to Sudan, so that's 175. And, well, the rest to Israel, with Sudan becoming a puppet, with Sudan puppeting Egypt and Libya gaining some lands. So realistically, it wasn't that they gained a lot out of the war, they lost a lot. Nobody really lost. Except Egypt was the one to lose. Egypt was the biggest loser. And Sudan likely too, because most of its cities would be gone due to the war. And well, there's no such thing as winning a war. But that's all for today's video. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Wild Mapper out. And until you subscribe. Bye, guys.